Everyone has a story. The automotive world is surrounded by some of the most passionate people on the planet. There's builders, collectors, and craftsmen who all have something to tell. I'm Brad King, and this is Stories in Steel. On this episode of Stories in Steel, we find out that one can never be too old to chase a dream. After working in the food, construction, and transportation industry, Bob Larson retired at the early age of 48 and decided to chase his passion of building hot rods. After a little research on what it entailed, he decided to chop his first car. The rest is history. We're sitting in your shop, and let's talk about you for a little bit. Let's talk about some of the things you've done with your life. You've chopped a lot of cars. I don't trust you around any of my vehicles.
Yeah, don't leave them here.
Just because I know how you are. It's like, yeah, bring it over your parking. I'm not parking anything in your house. So when did you realize that you wanted to start playing with the sheet metal and the fabrication into things? When was that part of your deal?
You know, I kind of got exposed to this real early on. This has not been my career until I retired, and I've been retired 18 years now. And my past had been in the food industry and transportation. Well, my dad was basically in the food industry also, but he had friends that had race cars, and on the weekends or his time off, I'd go with him. And I saw just, you know, it was just so fascinating to see this stuff. And you knew what original 32 looked like, or 33, and how these guys had either chopped them or modified them or taken the fenders off of them, whatever they've done to create this look. And probably one of the big turning moments at the time, didn't probably realize really the full extent of it, was my dad was involved with a car that ran at Bonneville and El Mirage in the 50s. It was owned by Jim Coburn. My dad was part of the pit crew. And I used to go down there with my dad while the guys were working on it in the shop. And Jim, to a little kid, he seemed like a giant, a great big guy. And he was gas welding the nose, aluminum nose he had built for the race car. And he was from the aircraft industry in World War II down in San Diego. And that was his specialty. He was a welder. And he's this great big huge guy with blue cobalt glasses on, gas welding. And it just looked so, incredible. And I later saw the nose leaned up against the wall while they were doing something. It hadn't been painted yet. And it was gas welded aluminum, and it looked like probably the best TIG job you would ever see today. And even as a little kid, you'd never heard the expression roll of dimes, but that's what it looked like. It was so incredible. And, my dad taught me how to acetylene weld. And then when I was in high school, in the 60s, we learned arc welding and metal shop. And so that was always fun. And realized, that something can look aesthetically nice and not have any strength to it and stuff like that, penetration. And so that's where, the metal shop teacher took a lot of time with me because he could tell I was really interested. So he showed me the proper way to weld and what, the term keyhole, I never knew what that meant. But to open it up and to, penetrate all the way through. And learned also in high school, they had just started vocational training, at least at the schools I was at. And one of the gentlemen owned a body shop in San Diego who was the instructor. And he did lead work if you wanted to learn it. And I was just so amazed at that. So yeah, it's interesting. The first year, you learn how to pick and file and smooth it all out and take your time. And I remember this was in 1969, 1970 when I graduated. One of the instructors at the college had a girlfriend, and he also had a 68 Charger. And she wrapped the quarter panel into something. So the car came in the class and he put me on it. And so, you pounded it all out, you straightened it out, and you let it in the quarter panel and all that kind of stuff. And it seemed like I lost track of time, but at least a couple of weeks to do. And we primed it. And at that point, we hadn't learned how to paint yet. He hadn't showed us that. So he painted it. And sometime later, she did the same quarter panel again, just, racked it up again. And so the instructor, she actually tore it too and ripped it and stuff. So, okay, Bob, it's your car again. So I go in there and I pounded it out really close and gas welded it up, because we didn't have MIG welding, or at least we didn't have it back then.
Right.
And so I started getting all the lead tools out and I had it all set up. And the instructor wanted me to show some of the newer students what was going on. So I had leaded up the door jamb where it got crinkled and I was ready to do the quarter panel. He says, okay, time out. He says, I've showed you guys how to do this right the first time. The old metal way of finishing. He says, now I'm going to show you how to make money. And he pulls out Bondo. And it was incredible. It's like, holy magic in a can. And I obviously knew what the stuff was. And it was neat. He showed you the proper way to put it on. And, it's not gunite. You don't build metal with it. But that was, that was a big exposure to it, too. And he was such a neat guy. He could be kind of rough on you, but a bunch of high school boys at that time, you needed it.
So he was a good influence on the beginning of what you were doing.
Yeah, very much so. And one car, it was in the auto mechanic side of another class, and it was an Austin Healey. He said, hey, go over there, the door's all messed up. So I go over there and look at it, and I said, okay, I can fix this thing. Drag out the welder, which they had in the auto shop. Go up there, start welding it, and I blew a hole in it about the size of a silver dollar. It was an aluminum door. So that was my first experience with aluminum.
Wow.
And, it was interesting. It was like, okay, you learned this. He says, I knew what was going on. Your turn to learn it. So, we made a little patch, and he showed me how to clean it up and flux it and all that. And it wasn't years and years later that I've gotten back into gas welding aluminum. But, those were two very early influences. And my brother was also, he had a 40 coupe in high school. And one time it was raining. He used to walk to school all the time. So he gave me a ride with his 40 coupe in elementary school. And I was the biggest dog on campus. Just that thing rumbled. It had a small block Chevy in it. And that was so cool. And then, in the San Diego area, my dad was good friends with Joaquin Arnett and Bean Bandits, and went over there and saw some of his stuff. And, like I said, I don't know if unfortunately, but that was not my career. I had the job in the food industry. But, when I retired, it's like, this is what I want to do. My dad bought a 36 three-window coupe. He had it, all originals. And then my brother got it in high school before his 40 coupe came along. And then when I got in high school, old enough to drive, I had the 36 Ford, in high school. And kept, still have the original car. And then unfortunately my dad passed away a few years ago. And so I hate to say it, but it was okay to hot rod it then, because he came out of the ground and strangled me had he realized what I did to it. But I originally built it. I unbolted everything and bolted in, a 350 disc brakes, the 9-inch rear end. And it's great. I've driven it to Viva several times and different shows all over Southern California. And it's very reliable, very fun. It's nice to go 70 miles an hour and stop versus the original car. And then when my dad passed away after a period of time, then I decided to chop it because I knew he couldn't come back.
So you just chopped it recently then now? That wasn't...
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago that I chopped it.
See, I thought you chopped that some years ago, so that's a fairly recent...
Yeah, that's not that long ago that I chopped that.
How old were you when you first chopped it? Were you already retired?
Yeah, I was already retired. Okay. And it was a Model A coupe, and my brother came up and helped a little bit with it. And it was fun, most people who chop cars realize those things aren't parallel at all. They look like it. It's an illusion, and Ford designed it that way. But when you start cutting, you got to taper everything in. So I chopped that and a number of the early 50 Chevy coupes. It didn't go too extreme on the chops, maybe 3 or 4 inches or something like that. Some of these get them so low where just barely your arm comes out the window. And you can appreciate the amount of work and effort but I've heard the more traditional, kind of like Sam Barris would do with a Merc or something like that.
Okay, so your dad was helping with the team back in the day. So how old were you when that first started? That was obviously an influence in your life, being around race car stuff.
Yeah, it was. My first time to Bonneville was 1958. So I was 6 years old and saw Mickey Thompson's run, saw the Vescos, and a bunch of neat old stuff. It's just such a cool time. So really enjoyed it. Really.
So how many years have you been going to Bonneville then?
This being 2018, this is the 20th year in a row, and missed all kinds of time in there between 1958 and now, and went sporadically through a number of years. Most of the time with the vacations I had, they didn't line up with Bonneville. Right. But I'd go to El Mirage when I could. Growing up and down in San Diego, we had Carlsbad Raceway, and there was a couple other ones, Ramona. And then the big thrill was to come to Lyons, Orange County, or Irwindale. And so that was always a lot of fun to see that, and just the fabulous paint jobs. I remember looking at that. I enjoy painting my own stuff because it's such a, the preparation is so much to make it look right. And I'm definitely a single stage guy and call you to make them look like something when they're done. But it's definitely that kind of work.
You were kind of a late in life car builder guy. You'd built stuff for yourself, but had never really gone after doing the hardcore stuff until after you were retired. If you think you're too old for this, you're not too old for this. Have you taken any classes for any metal classes, or have you taken anything, or is this just all self-taught?
Well, like I said, I had spent 2 years in high school in auto body class, and the guy, was an excellent instructor. And I had worked on some of my own stuff through all this period of time. And then when I did retire, I took some classes at a community college here, and mainly in the welding program, just to refresh myself. And we didn't have TIG back, so learned the TIG process. And I started off all the way from acetylene, going through arc welding, MIG, and then TIG. But also took the auto body program, and that was interesting. And it was more of at this point in time, it's like replacement of panels versus trying to correct them. There's some of that, and understand how metal works now and how they punch out panels. Sometimes it is truly a lot easier to just replace them than it is try to straighten them. Right. But I've taken courses through Ron Covell, and he's been fantastic. He is a demonstration lecture program class. I need my hands on it. I need to screw it up a couple of times to learn, how to do it. And so I've taken classes up north through the Tin Man, Kent White. He starts off, he gives you a little bit of a lecture, and he'll demonstrate a process to you, and then he'll break you up into teams based on what you're doing, and then you do it. And it's actually through the hands-on process, because you can watch somebody run an English wheel all day long, but until you try to do it.
You need to feel what it's doing.
Yes.
You need to feel it and watch
metal.
It arching. If you're bending, you need to, welding, you need to feel it's all feel. There's a certain feel to different things.
And you realize, things that they're telling you that they're looking for, but you need to experience. You take it gradually, and you can see a change, and you can feel a lot of it. So it was through Ron Covell and Kent White that I've learned how to use a plenishing hammer and an English wheel. And heaven forbid I ever get to be Ron Covell, but I'm confident I can turn out
And you've
panels.
ruined a lot of sheet metal in the process.
But I still have all my fingers.
That's on all your digits. That's a
I
plus
still
right
have
there.
No screwed up thumbs. And then I've done a lot of work for one gentleman in particular that has quite an extensive car collection down in Irvine. And most of it is an old Mercedes. Well, they want it gas welded like it used to be. And if they don't want any seams where there originally wasn't seams, but if you're doing any attachment to anything, they want to see a gas bead. That's what it was, and even in aluminum. Yeah, those are big influences, those two gentlemen. And then, like I said, that friend of my father's. And just going to different shows and seeing what people can create, it's just incredible. I really enjoy that.
Okay, so what builders, those two guys, as far as learning metalwork, those two guys were, you learned, they were your teachers, mentors, they taught you. who were your inspirations as far as, I mean, was it guys like Sam Barris, or I mean, who were guys that inspired you in the hot rod world? Who were guys that you liked to look at their stuff?
You know, you're right. Somebody like Sam Barris, you realize what he did at the time he did it. There's so many, you know, new guys out there. They're just doing tremendous work. That there was a gentleman at SoCal, Birdman, and he was phenomenal putting stuff together, and watch him gas weld. He was definitely a proponent of that. Right. But it was guys like that, you know, that you just saw what they did before it got covered up. And, you know, a lot of things do need, you know, fine tuning, if you want to call it that. Like I said, I remember the gentleman saying, you don't gunite Bondo on, you know, you just lightly, it's a skim coat, and that's what it's supposed to be.
I've seen guys Michelangelo cars where it's carved out of mud.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's a car I've got to do for a gentleman that it was a very beautiful car when he bought it. And I don't know how they came to doing something on the quarter panel. Well, it's chicken wire, foam, Bondo, and it's coming up to me. And he says, oh, we bought replacement panels. You know, all you got to do is cut them out and put them in. Well, they don't make panels for this car. So I take probably what they give me, I hope, and then shape. You probably make new panels for it.
Right.
That's what I'll do.
You gonna recreate the chicken wire and the foam?
Yeah, in metal, you know, in 19 gauge cold roll.
There you go. The other day when we talked, you were heading down to LA somewhere to look at some Model A parts. You have a really bad habit of buying stuff. I don't know, you're not much of a selling guy, but you sure like collecting the parts. Just to add to how many cars do you have around your yard right now?
You know, I've counted, just taking a loose inventory, and there's 15 projects here. And then there's also, there's about 5 or 6 done cars. So
if you live to be like 212, that'll give you a good chance to get all the cars done, then. That's kind of...
You know, every time my wife walks out here, she's like, you know, at one time I had to live to be 100, and then it was 120. Well, now I got to live to be 150. But, yeah, what I'm, you know, I've truly... got a real passion for the older stuff, whether it be Model Ts, Model As, and into the 30s and the early 40s. I've enjoyed building a lot of hot rods for friends and people and the customers, if you want to call them that. And I'm going to build a single-seater racer with a Rajo motor I picked up, which is a modified overhead Model T motor, and a bunch of old speed parts. But there's events now where you can take your old hot rod out and you sign your life away that if anything happens, they're not liable.
When you die, it's not our fault.
Yeah, exactly. They have hill climbs, you know, that I don't think there's much of a hill.
But why, is that something you can make into a street car? I mean, you could put lights in a windshield, or could you even do that?
Yeah, you can. Some of them. Yes, I have some of them that qualify that you can run.
And so where was this racing? What kind of racing venue is this? A single-seater? Is it roundy round, or what is
no, it's, you know, like the Race a Gentleman, or the RPM event up in Paso Robles. And that's working on all these old cars for me, and really enjoy it.
I do notice a lot of, you know, since we first met, you know, your style, you were kind of heavy into the customs. And that stuff kind of went back, and you started playing with the stuff with the wire wheels on it. So the solid steel wheels, that were wire wheels. And I see a lot of what you're doing now. Some of these pickups you're building are not the normal thing you see cruising around on the streets. So what do you call that style? What would that even, it's like pre-war something, but I don't know what.
You know, traditional, I guess you would call it. It's not a restoration by any means. The running gear's old. As a matter of fact, a number of vehicles I have still have mechanical brakes on them, not hydraulics. A lot of them still have 4-cylinder motors in them. So a traditional hot rod would be a good term for it. The wire wheels and all that stuff, 4-cylinder motors.
And you've been driving some of these.
Oh yes,
some of these events you're driving around.
Oh yeah, very much so. I take one Model T out. There's a group of us go have breakfast on Monday, and we drive out. We all drive our old cars, you know. And we got a road that's not too heavily traveled. And my wife goes to events with me when she can, and she says, "Geez, everybody's honking at you, or like, you know, or waving at you. Is your car falling apart or something like that?" I said, "No, they're just happy to see something like that out on the road." And you know, even I still consciously look when people are, you know, kind of honking their horn or waving at you and stuff.
And they're more fun than a Prius anyway.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, financially, I don't know if they're any better or not and stuff, but they are fun.
Another thing we didn't cover is it a 46, 47, 48? What is the one you're building for your grandson?
Oh, it's a 46 Ford, what do they call that thing? A coupe sedan. It's a coupe with longer doors on it. The gentleman gave me the car years ago, and my grandson's just turned 14 years old. So we've taken the 46 Ford coupe, and he spent 2 weeks with me in the summertime, and we've chopped the thing, and that just made it flow so much better. So I bought him a real good welding helmet and gloves and all that kind of stuff. And I did some tack weld, showing him what was going on, and then let him do it. That let him burn a couple holes in it, and learn to move and what to look for. And fortunately with MIG, real fast you can get pretty proficient with it. He got real good. He did a bunch of welding, spot welded all this thing back together, and then actually started welding it back together. Once he left, and he welded what he could in the time, I finished welding it up for him because that's just a long, slow process. And so I got it all welded up, and he's going to learn how to lead in the seams. Out of all the grandkids, they have 5 grandkids, and he's the only boy. He's probably going to inherit all this stuff. So it's going to be his one way or another.
So this can go one of two ways. Either he's going to love to come visit Grandpa and want to move up here, or he's never going to want to see you again. This can go, there's no gray area. How many have you chopped?
I thought about that question. I've lost track. Please, not that it's been that many. But I could think of probably 30 of them, 40 of them that I can think of. So.
But that's certain things that cannot be taught. You're not going to learn that in school at all. You do it, and everybody has a different vision of what they think. You're going, I'm going to chop the 3. They guess I'm going to take 1.5 feet out of it. And, or I can't even open, can't even get in the car. But it's still a vision of, it should have this much droop to it, or the crown should be, there's a certain look a car should have, and I agree. Everybody kind of has their own thing what they like about a car. But you stand back, the car should have a certain look to it. This is good. You've proved that. Just another example of you never outgrow this hobby, this pastime, this way of life. I don't even want to call it a hobby because it's my life. It's your life. This is who we. It's all consuming. This is who we are. But yeah, you're a perfect example of you don't outgrow this, and you're in your 60s now. You're gonna be in your 80s. It's not gonna change. You're gonna still be out in the garage messing things up and pounding on metal. And thank you for telling your story, sir. Stories in Steel episode. What about Hot Rod Bob? Take 1. On this episode of Stories in Steel, we find out that one can never be too old to chase it. Yeah, say that to the guy that's reading the copy here. After working in the food, construction, and transportation industry, Bob Larson retired at the early age of 48. Yeah. Okay, look, you're no Brian. We know this already. Who is this guy? Is it Bob or Robert? Bobbert? What? Nah. After working in the food, construction, and transportation industry, well, I guess he needed to make a bunch of money because he knew he was going to spend it all building cars. Is this the best that we could write? Okay, well. What about Brian? Where's Brian? Right, I know I'm not as funny as Brian, but Brian was busy, so I'm doing my own voiceovers, and this is what you're going to get, so sorry. How does one decide that the first thing they're going to do when they build a car is chop a top? Oh, okay, that's nothing like a minor undertaking there. All right, Brian, I tried it. Not as funny as you are. I will admit that fact. It is what it is. I'm not doing this anymore. For more stories and podcasts, go to www.round6pod.com.